Wesley McCammon, and this is my Star Trek series ranking video. Okay, so in addition to Doctor Who, which is what I've done a lot of videos on lately, another series that I really enjoy quite a bit is Star Trek. So I guess you would consider me a Whovian and a Trekker. Trekker. I have watched Star Trek as long as I can remember. I think the very first thing I saw from Star Trek that I can really remember is Star Trek II, the movie. And I remember going to the drive-in theater, if you know what that is, to see Star Trek II. And so that really kind of opened my eyes. And so from that point on, I started getting into the original series, and then Next Generation came on in the 1980s. So I want to take you through what I consider to be the best and worst of the Star Trek series franchise. I will be limiting this list to television series, so I'm not considering any movies or the reboot in this video. So let's get started. So there have been several TV series with the Star Trek name, and I think the worst of those would have to be Star Trek Enterprise. Or actually, Enterprise was the name. I think they added Star Trek eventually to it, but it was originally just called Enterprise. I'm sure they had all the best intentions with making Enterprise. And granted, had it been not a Star Trek series, I think it actually would have worked much better. But you can't set a series before the original series and have it look like the technology was so much more advanced than the original series. When I heard that they were doing a TV show set before the original series, I thought, wow, that's going to be really cool for them to go back and like retroactively de-evolve the technology from the original series. I thought that would be really interesting to do. You had modern technology in this ship that looked like it was more advanced than the Enterprise was from the original series. So I don't think it really worked. Plus, on top of that, the storylines just weren't very interesting, I don't think. And a lot of times the plot lines were confusing, especially when you get into the later seasons, when you had this Xindi weapon and time travel, the time Cold War, whatever it was called. It got really confusing, and one of the things that makes Star Trek work is the fact that every story is unique. It's not tied to a story arc so much so that it becomes unwatchable for the average viewer. And I think that's where they made the mistake in Enterprise, that every episode was so tied to what happened before that a new viewer just couldn't pick it up, and therefore the ratings weren't that good, from my understanding. Now, there were a couple of really standout episodes, a couple that I remember from Enterprise that I thought were really, really good. The ones set in the alternate universe, in the mirror universe, were really, really good. Those are probably my favorite ones. There was also another episode where some Borg from First Contact were found or were activated by some scientists, and so they had to kind of fight the Borg before they were ready to fight the Borg, kind of thing. Kind of created a continuity error, because how did they know about the Borg and then not know about the Borg? Anyway, so all in all, it would be the series that I would watch the least. Very rarely have I gone back and watched any of the Enterprise episodes. But like I said, there are a few good ones here and there. The next series, in the order that I would kind of watch them, would be Deep Space Nine. And I hate putting in this position because Deep Space Nine is a really, really good show. The theme song is amazing, by the way. The theme song is probably one of the best things about it. There were some outstanding episodes of Deep Space Nine, and the only reason why I would put it here is because some of the other shows are such good quality, it would be hard to beat them. Deep Space Nine was Star Trek's attempt to become more gritty and more away from Gene Roddenberry's original idea of kind of this utopian, everybody's happy, there's no hunger, there's no war, there's nothing wrong with people. The problem with that idea, while it's fine for a philosophical idea, it makes for very bad drama. And so I think it was their idea to kind of go back to something like really dirty and dingy, and to kind of show where humanity is at this point. Again, the first couple of seasons, which I think you'll see the pattern in most all these shows, the first couple of seasons weren't that great. There were a couple of standard episodes. But eventually you met this enemy called the Dominion, and I think that's where Deep Space Nine hit its stride, with the war with the Dominion. You had some really, really outstanding episodes. One of the ones that come to mind is, I believe it's called In the Pale Moonlight, where Captain Sisko is making this whole log entry about how basically he has broken so many laws, and then of course at the end he deletes the log, but it's about him coming to terms with what would you do to win a war? What lines would you cross to make sure that your side wins in this conflict that could mean the destruction of everything? So it was really an outstanding episode. Another one that I think should be mentioned, I can't think of it off the top of my head. I'll put the title around here somewhere because I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's one of my favorite episodes. Captain Sisko becomes hurt by the warp core, and he keeps jumping in. And so we follow Jake Sisko throughout his whole life, and he just has these brief flashes with his dad. It's such a tear-jerking episode. And of course, it features the death of Jadzia Dax, which is a really heartbreaking moment as well, because I really liked Jadzia Dax. Odo was a really interesting character. Of course, this is the first time they had a chance to really play with that kind of technology in Star Trek, and so the shapeshifter Odo, who was one of the founders, which is one of the groups of the Dominion, along with the Jem'Hadar and the Vorta, I think all worked really well as an enemy. I think they were probably one of the best enemies of any Star Trek franchise, the Dominion. And it was just really great. And of course, they had some really good stories with Nog and him entering Starfleet and being the first Ferengi in Starfleet. Little Green Men is a really great episode featuring the Ferengi, Rom, Nog, and Quark. It's just a really great, fun show. And of course, you got to see a lot of space battles, which should please Joe very much. A lot of blowing things up. So Deep Space Nine is more for that genre of show. So we'll move on to the next, the one that kind of this will probably be the one that will get me in trouble the most, I think. So my third less favorite, or my number 3 show would be the original series. And I know some people some diehard fans will just kill me for putting the original series at number 3, but the original series is what brought most of us into the Star Trek fold. I mean, it was really a high concept show for the time, and it did a lot of social justice functions. It showed us that people could work together, and of course, this was in the '60s when you had a lot of tension between people, and so Star Trek showed us in this kind of alien setting and in the future that it really didn't matter what our differences are. We could work together and to solve problems, to conquer things, to fight enemies. And so the original series is a beautiful show. I mean, it's beautiful color-wise. Granted, the special effects aren't really great, but it was the 60s. Technology just wasn't there. If you've ever seen the remastered episodes, they look incredibly well done. They've kept the feel of the effects. If they had the technology to do these effects back then, they would have looked more like these remastered effects. And so I really love the remastered episodes. I still like watching the original effects as well. I mean, I'm just kind of I like seeing that kind of historical. I like seeing the original cut of them as well. So it's really outstanding. Mirror Mirror comes to mind again. Set in the Mirror Universe was a really good episode. The whole first season is really, really quality episodes. The Naked Time is a really good episode. Enemy Within is a really good episode. I mean, the whole first series is good of the original series. I really enjoy the vivid colors. The technology looks really cool. It looks really futuristic for the 1960s. So yeah. And of course, then we were introduced to our first Vulcan, Mr. Spock. Every series has their character that allows us to look at humanity objectively. Enterprise, had T'Pol. In Deep Space Nine, you had Odo. In the original series, of course, was Mr. Spock. That was his function, trying to deal with his half-human side, his Vulcan side, his half-human side, and trying to come to terms with that. In The Next Generation, you had Data, and in and in Voyager, you had 709, Neelix, at first Neelix, and then, of course, 709, and then a holographic Doctor as well. All of them kind of giving feedback on humanity. So Mr. Spock was our first glimpse at a character like that. And so I think it let us see the good and bad in ourselves. So I think that was a really positive character to see. And of course, you can't get much more, brave hero type than Captain Kirk. I always was kind of partial to Dr. McCoy, myself, and Scotty. Those are kind of two of my favorites. And I love Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura. I think she's just a fabulous lady. Beautiful, beautiful lady. So, yeah, those are, some of my favorite characters. So, my number 2 show would have to be Star Trek The Next Generation. Star Trek The Next Generation came on during my high school days. And so when I think back to Star Trek, that's kind of the era I think of is my high school career kind of days, because that's what would come on. Star Trek The Next Generation, I can understand why they were so worried about it, because you're taking something that was absolutely fantastic in the 60s, and you're rebooting it. Well, not even rebooting it. You're continuing it in the 80s, and you're doing so with new technology, new characters, set, far in the future, and you're hoping that it's going to get that same bit of fame, or it's going to be as good quality as the original series. I will tell you that the first series of The Next Generation is cringeworthy to watch. There are very few episodes in that first couple of seasons that are hard for me to watch. They did a lot of duplication of stuff that happened in the original series, or a continuation of what happened then, and it just wasn't needed, I don't think. But I see why they did it. I mean, you bring back a familiar storyline or a familiar enemy, or something along those lines. And of course, The Next Generation also introduced us to the Borg, which are, arguably one of the best creations in the Star Trek franchise. You don't get much better than the episode where the Borg invaded, the two-parter where they kidnapped Captain Picard and turned him into Locutus. There's some really outstanding, especially the later seasons, you get some really, really quality episodes. And of course, that was one. One of my favorite ones, the really big tearjerker one, involves no space battles at all. It's called The Inner Light, and where Captain Picard is hijacked, his brain is hijacked by this probe, and basically he lives out his life on this other world as this other person, and he has all these experiences, and then he basically he grows old in his brain, interacting with this probe, and he witnesses these people dying. His wife dies. I mean, it's really emotional story. And then you find out that it was all to do with this probe, and he wakes back up and it's only been like 20 minutes. And he's lived his whole life there. So yeah, any of the Borg episodes are really good. There's some good Q episodes as well. If you get past the first couple of seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation, they're just outstanding from that point on. And I hate to say it because I like Denise Crosby, but when the stories after Denise Crosby dies and Worf takes over as security chief, those are some of the best episodes of the series. Of course there are some bad ones, but for the most part, after season 2 or 3 of The Next Generation, you can't go wrong. So, that leaves you with my favorite show of the franchise. My favorite show of the franchise is Star Trek Voyager. I love Star Trek Voyager. This was my college days. And I have to say, they have a perfect cast. I love all the characters in it. Captain Janeway, I mean, you just don't mess with her. Captain Picard was great. He liked to talk a lot. Captain Janeway is more of a lady of action. She would sooner fire her phaser than to chit-chat with you, which is what Captain Picard would be more likely to do. Voyager, to me, felt much more original series. It was about exploring this new quadrant that we had never been in before. They were cut off from Starfleet. Whatever Captain Janeway decided is what happened. There was no consultation with Starfleet or Starfleet assigning you somewhere. It was about survival, especially in the first couple of seasons. It was about getting your crew home and survival. And to me, that was such a heartfelt desire that we could all understand, that we all want to get home. We all want to reach that point where we feel safe. And nobody on Voyager could feel that at first. Even the crew was kind of mismatched. You had a group of Maquis crew members and a group of Starfleet crew members living on this ship that was not built for a long-term voyage. And all this pressure to keep everything together was on Janeway's shoulders. Kate Mulgrew is an incredible actress. And she did such a good job in that role. No nonsense, hard line. She had to be. Her first officer was, Commander Chakotay, who was our first Native American character. Did a really great job. I think they downplayed his Native American-ness in later episodes. They really played it up in the first couple, and then he kind of went back down. But he had the cool tattoo, on his head. And we were introduced to one of my favorite characters of all time, which is the holographic Doctor. It just cracks me up to hear him say, "Please state the nature of the medical emergency." I just love that line. Everything he says is golden to me. I just love the EMH. I love the fact that he didn't take a name, that he was just called the Doctor, obviously. And, the EMH was a great name for him. I really like that. There was a great episode where him and Andy Dick were both EMHs. A great episode. It's so funny. And I think that character was, especially in the first couple of seasons, that character was our insight into humanity. Eventually that role was taken over by 7 of 9. Kess, who was Neelix's girlfriend in the first couple of episodes and kind of was the reason why Neelix was with them at the beginning, wasn't a very successful character in that role of letting us see. She only lived 9 years, and she came back for a great episode, by the way. I think the episode's called Fury, but she came back as the show aged, as an older person who was mad at Captain Janeway for letting her go off on her own. But anyway, they brought 7 of 9 in, who was a Borg child who was converted as a child to Borg, who they eventually freed of technology, and she eventually joined the crew. She was still very Borg sounding, beautiful, obviously. They removed all but a couple of little implants here and there, and she became our insight into humanity, trying to understand, because she was only 6 when she was converted into Borg, and so she doesn't have a lot of that human interaction. Being so young when she was converted, she's been Borg all of her life, and so trying to understand human relationships and friendships and all that. She's very smart technologically, but lacks all those social skills that she's having to learn now, that she's never had to use before. And 7 of 9 works as a brilliant character. I love 7 of 9. I really like the Borg children. They also rescued a set of Borg children who had to learn the same kind of lessons and kind of looked to 7 of 9 as a mentor, but also butted heads with 7 of 9 because she had her things in order the way she thought they worked, and they didn't work for the children because they're still children. And so I think that was a brilliant piece of casting, Jerry Ryan as 7 of 9. The other characters were really great too. Harry Kim was a great character, ensign, the whole time that they were gone. Tom Paris was an interesting idea. This guy who was a great pilot who was a criminal when they first got there, but the pilot died, so the helmsman died, and so Tom Paris had to take over as the helmsman. Him and Chakotay didn't get along at first, and then became sort of good friends. And then B'Elanna Torres, the Klingon chief engineer, who was Maquis, who became the chief engineering officer. Brilliant idea. There's an episode called Dreadnought, which is one of my favorite ones, and it's about this Cardassian weapon that she had captured and reprogrammed to fight the Cardassians, and she's kind of having this battle with this probe weapon thing. Anyway, it's a great episode, one of my favorite ones for Voyager. But I have to say, as a general whole, and the Voyager theme song, by the way, is absolutely beautiful. I have to say that I think Voyager is such a great show in general. I could sit down right now and watch any episode of Voyager and enjoy it. And I know that I'm at odds with a lot of Star Trek fans. I know there are a lot of Star Trek fans who did not enjoy Voyager. But to me, it is the most Star Trek feeling of the series, except for the original series. I think it feels more like Star Trek than even The Next Generation does, because it feels like the original series to me. So anyway, those are my list of the way that I would rank the shows in order of quality and rewatchability and how I feel about the Star Trek shows. So again, Enterprise, I could take it, I could leave it. Deep Space Nine, definitely couldn't leave it, but it's not my first choice. I'm going to watch a Star Trek episode. The original series in the third spot. I love the original series. Obviously, the special effects aren't going to be, up to standards for today, but I absolutely love the original series. The stories were great. The characters were great. The Next Generation, every Star Trek fan has to love the Next Generation. It's a great, great series, especially in the later episodes. As you go on in the Next Generation, it gets better and better and better. And, of course, my number one show, Star Trek Voyager. Great cast, great stories, great story arc, great idea, great concept. It's just an incredible show. So if you agree with me, leave a comment down below. If you disagree with me, thank you for subscribing to Hermits United, and feel free to go subscribe to my own channel, Wesley Hammond, Pisgah Science. I think it's youtube.com/PisgahScience, which should take you to my channel. You can also follow me on social media. Twitter is Pisgah Science 2. What do you call that thing? Instagram is RLWRM, and Snapchat is Pisgah Science. I'm pretty much Pisgah Science anywhere on the web. PisgahScience.com is the website. I also do Doctor Who fan audio adventures. So feel free to go, look those up, or like us on the Facebook page at Doctor Who Fan Audio Adventures, DWFAA. Those are really great, if I do say so myself. Anyway, thank you for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy Star Trek. Maybe I'll make some more Star Trek videos if there's need for them. Okay. See ya. Bye.